Welcome to Minerva. Today we're going to be discussing the Mothman. Now, we'd like to give you enough information that you can go away and then do your own study. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Duncan.
Hello.
Let's get into it. The Mothman. Okay, so in West Virginia in 1966, a place called Point Pleasant, there was a sighting of a creature. Let's begin there before we get much further. Now, Point Pleasant's a very kind of sleepy town, very normal town in America, very generic. But there is this incident which is now completely infamous for. The first sighting was two couples in a car, and they were driving through an area of like a forest area called the TNT area. And it's actually called the TNT area because during the war they used it as a munitions jump, you know, and they would put ammunition into these sort of small little, I suppose, little huts, and they would hide them there, and they were building them up for the war effort. Now, as they're driving through this area, just on a random evening, all of a sudden, the women, who I believe were in the back, spotted out the side of the window this winged humanoid creature with red eyes. Started obviously hysterically screaming, etc., and it zoomed in front of the car. Everybody was quite frightened. It then went back and it started to trail them. So they hot-footed it, put their foot down, and straight down the road into the main town. Once they get to the main town, this creature backs off and they lose it. And they have a discussion in the car and they say, well, are we hallucinating? What's going on here? What's happened? Blah, 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 blah. We want to tell the police, but are we going to be laughed at? So they decide to go back and look for it. They go back, they see it in a field, they are convinced now that this is real, it's something tangible, and they go and they tell the police officers. This is where the myth really then starts to obviously build, because you've got this winged creature that they believe is out there in this kind of wildlife park kind of area. And they turn to the police, and the police then create a statement, and the thing completely blows. So that's the beginnings, that's the essence of the mystery. How do you feel about this as a thing to begin with?
Yeah, tantalising, quite famous in its own right. Love how you saw it again, said the beautiful imagery of a sleepy American town. It's just the town, isn't it? Really,
it is.
The thing I like about the story is it's just sometimes it's the simple things, isn't it? Like say. Let's say that they saw something and they had their instinct reaction and they drive away from it.
Yeah.
And normally when we hear stories like this or so-called encounters, that's it. And they then go off and tell their story. But in this, they realise it's bizarre and go back.
Yeah.
Which kind of adds a little bit of credibility to it. Because it's... You know, they're realising something happened. Did it really happen? Before we make fools of ourselves, let's go and check. So it offers credibility. The question is, was that adding of credibility genuine or not? Or was it a case of, well, all other stories does this. Let's say we went back and go back. I don't know. It's a point of debate. Do I believe in the Mothman? What a surprise. No. But there's several theories behind it. And the one I particularly like is that there is a bird indigenous to America, but I believe its normal migratory thing was like several hundred miles further north, I believe. And it could be one of these. There is a heron or a crane that's around about 6 foot tall, massive wingspan. So a case of, it's around about the height of a human being. Yeah. It has a wingspan. And so it could have been one of these things. Of course, in this area, we have to explain the eyes, etc. But in the same way, I mean, not an ornithologist, I don't know if it's the same with birds as it is with cats, but we know with certain animals that it's not necessarily if you shine the light in the animal's eyes, but refractive light, like it make a cat's eyes really shine.
Yeah.
And we naively think that, the cat's eyes are shining at me, but it's not, it's a reflection.
Yeah.
So is it at all possible that this is the case? And so we have this massive crane bird, it gets seen, it's in the middle of nowhere, so the only lights would have been from the car itself.
Yep.
So there, it's got an interest in what's this, and so it drives along, and so I'll follow. It's not a small bird, so it's there. So I hate to dismiss it so early on in the conversation, but that's what I see it as. But as you say, that's the only start of the story. It doesn't end with just this one incident.
It doesn't, and something of that size following your car, even just seeing it. And,
apologies, it would have been terrifying.
It would have been absolutely terrifying. And what happened was, after this, one of the women needed, really deep therapy and needed really looking after, because she was just inconsolable. But after having seen this thing, and then there's stories that begin about. Well, another reason that she needed some help was that she was visited by two men in black, the typical men in black that we hear about in all of these stories. You often hear, and certainly American stories, you'll hear that two men turn up and they'll talk to the victim, and this might be in ufology, it might be in anything like this, and they'll tell them, don't say anything, keep your mouth shut and we won't do anything to you, etc. And that's clearly very worrying, and that was another part of why she was so petrified about the whole thing. And of course, Men in Black could be another subject for us for another day, probably, which could be interesting. But having that around it also adds some intrigue. They also say that once the rumour had got out, there were up to 1,000 people out looking for it, out with torches in the night, trying to find this thing. It was such a big deal there. And, there were lots of other people then started to come forward with sightings. Maybe not always as big as this one where they'd seen it, but they would have seen it in the distance, or they had heard something, or something else had happened within their life that had led them to somewhere. And of course, this is there. It varies so much. But I think with Mothman, and I think the reason why this is such an exciting mystery, is that there are over 100 sightings that have been documented.
That is something. Part of the cynic in me would have gone down the line of people want to get their name on the map, and people everyone's talking about it. I've seen it too. But I think in conversations we've had before, you've drawn a parallel of things like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or some other some Squatch or whatever.
Sasquatch or any of those.
There is these things where it is native to a region, but we don't see the social phenomenon being the same, where people aren't saying they've seen these other creatures. But this one, for some reason, the populace is saying it. So again, it adds credence that whatever the creature is, whether it be a bird or whatever, something is actually there, unless there's another motivation.
Yeah, and it's always the same as well. This is the thing. It doesn't seem to change with Mothman, whereas with other mysteries that you look into, over time it starts to change and develop into completely different things. Again, you see that with ufology, where one person will see one type of alien, another person will see a different type of alien. This is the same creature being seen every time, explained exactly the same. 6 to 8 foot, looks like a man, it has big wings and a large span, and of course with these sort of bright red eyes, which again it sounds terrifying. Really.
I know, but I must admit, the thing that was disappointed in looking into this one was the actual name Mothman, because I must admit, I was aware. You see the image, you see the cutout image, which is obviously to the film, etc. But I was expecting something to look like a moth. And it doesn't, does it? Mostly it's almost like a big owl sort of thing. But of course, then we find out whether the name actually came from. It was, as you say, they went to the news reports. And at the time during the 60s, there was the TV series of Batman. Batman was very popular. And although a certain character wasn't in the TV series, due to the popularity of the comics, there was a character called Mothman.
Right. Okay.
And that's basically where it's got it. The press picked up its name. And I was really disappointed that the description of it wasn't this like disheveled like moth. Because I thought it added so much to the passion to it, that there was this decaying thing that was living out there. But no, it's just Big Bird.
Yeah, just Big Bird from Batman.
Big Bird from Sesame Street.
Exactly. So the other thing that I love about this is that And it's great to look through all of the different people that have spoken about and seen it. And there's pilots, then there's all different people from different places where you would really trust that they've seen the right type of thing, or they would be able to identify this as something. And this isn't just without putting a stigma on anything. This isn't someone that's crazy or nuts, etc. This is someone that pilots working have seen it, and other people in there, they'll just be taking a walk and they'll see it. It just seems so random across the board that people are seeing this thing, which I find very interesting. And there was a gentleman called John Keel who really seemed to make this myth blow. He came in, he started interviewing lots of people. And when we were talking about this previously, I said, he brought forward lots of these people because there were lots of people that wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah,
and he found his way into the homes of families that said, no, we've seen it as well. And it all seemed to happen around this period, around that sort of, within sort of 2 years, everybody had been seeing that. And he was very well known for creating some books on the subject, and then obviously inspiring a film on the subject, which, again, is worth people going and seeing. Go and have a look. Whoa!
Apparently it's worth going and seeing.
It's worth going and seeing. Go and have a look, because it doesn't tell the story in exactly the way the myth does, but television never does it?
No, that's very true, very true. Well, I suppose the thing with it is, I don't know where I'm actually going to go with that. It's... they call it the prophecies, don't they? They do. But to me, the word prophecy implies that it's actually going to make the statement of what's actually going to happen. And that doesn't seem to be the case, not the way that I've taken it. Because, of course, it relates to me, there is far more of that folklore-like concept of the Harbinger of Doom.
Yes.
Where, and again, coincidentally, it's normally related to a bird, a black bird. Yeah. I'm not talking about English blackbird, but a black-coloured bird that, when it's around, it pertains doom. Because he was actually he was relating to an event that happened. Was it 2 years later?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. So what happened a couple of years later was the bridge that linked the town to the sort of mainland, called the Silver Bridge, collapsed.
Yeah,
and I think it's like 47 people or 46 people died in that. Yeah. And of course, people from the town were having to pull out other people from the town, out of this sort of collapse of a bridge and out of cars and stuff. An absolutely horrific event. And of course, at that time, that town had started to become known for Mothman and then become known for this accident.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, you've got both of these things happening. But it's an absolutely horrific thing to happen.
But that's what I mean, because the case of. The Russians have their own Mothman, which is a case of just before the accident at Chernobyl. A lot of the workers say they saw this man-like bird, huge thing, black, it was just around the complex. And within, I think it was like 2 days, that's when the accident actually happened. Right. Okay. So you see how this story gets perpetuated of where have this harbinger of doom and a massive accident. Although saying that, the Chernobyl one happened within days. With the one happening like 2 years later, I just wonder if we are actually just linking two events rather than one actually being a prophecy or a harbinger of doom.
You are, and you can imagine how it plays in the minds of people. I saw one of the sort of witnesses who was a child at the time, very young, and she remembers hearing in the evening something land on the roof a number of times and kind of scarper around and then fly off, and you wouldn't hear it again. And of course, as a child, every time she'd report it to her parents, Mum, there's something on the roof, Dad, there's something on the roof. And they would say, don't worry about it, it's fine. And then, of course, later on, she would catch them in the kitchen talking about this thing, saying, what is this thing on the roof? It's petrifying. And you can see how it's playing on the minds of everybody. And it does sometimes makes me wonder if that just helps. It helps the mystery perpetuate, because if everyone's talking about it, the next time you see something at the back of the garden, you think, oh, what was that? Instantly, that's Mothman.
Well, that's it. It's like what they say about, I know I dismissed the sense of at the beginning where you would say that there have been so many sightings because people want to be famous and want to go. But I can imagine years later, if it's because, now at the time they have a festival for it, don't they? They do. How long has it been seen in 40 odd years, if not longer? Yeah. Which again goes on that sense of if it was a migratory bird outside of its area, it would have had offspring, it would have died off. But anyway, going back to, I can imagine now that there would almost be a kudos, or a sense of if you haven't seen it, you're not a member of the town, and so but anything you would have seen then, any sort of like black figure. At last I've seen the Mothman.
Yeah, this is one thing that makes me really sceptical about this. Is that
sorry, say that again slowly.
I'm the skeptic this time. Point Pleasant as a place has now Point Pleasant has now got lots and lots of merchandise. It's got a statue to it. It has the festival, and I can completely appreciate why they would maybe use this. And we see it in Rennes-le-Château and places like that where there's a mystery and they build on that from a business perspective. But it just sticks for me a little bit that, you know, have they continued the myth? Have they tried to, you know, are we going to hear about more sightings there once things start to settle, etc., etc.? Only, I guess, time will tell on that.
Make a remake of the film and get it all going again, you know.
Exactly. And again, we've seen that with other mysteries as well.
I made it jokingly, but you're right. Yeah.
No, you do. You see that all the time with other mysteries, and I think that's the interesting thing with this. Look, something happened. Over 100 people to see something. There's got to be something, and I really like the theory that you talk about with the bird. I didn't know about that before we discussed it, so that's interesting. I came to Mothman many years ago when I was listening to a podcast or an interview with somebody who was talking about the Brentford Griffin. So in Brentford in London, and you know, for years there's been this discussion that there was these people that saw a griffin walking around the streets of London, you know. And you hear of these kind of monsters and creatures everywhere. We've got the Green Men. We've got lots of stuff like that that's pushed through history that we hear about. So this is no different. It just feels that it's got a bit more in regards to witnesses. Yeah. It's got a bit more in regards to credibility.
But you've also got the aspect I didn't know about. You're talking about the UFO accounts that happened at the same area.
Yeah, so again, we've got the core mystery, which is the Mothman.
Apologies, yeah.
And then around the side of that, you start to get some UFO stuff. And around the time people are going and searching for it, they're also seeing bright lights in the sky. This is all documented. Lots of people saying they're seeing UFOs as well. But one of the stories that I found in researching for this show that was really interesting was there were two different incidents. But the first incident, a gentleman was driving down the road and a car comes flashing past the other way with another object behind it. Right. Essentially a UFO, something that's sort of flying behind it. And he's quite freaked out by this, as you would imagine. And minutes later, it's in front of his car and basically stops so he can't get round it. So he brings his car to a halt and somebody gets out of the UFO and walks over. And the way that it's sort of described is like a policeman.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can just imagine it.
It's crazy, but it comes over as a policeman. He's got his hands folded and wrapped under his armpits. And he starts talking to him, and they have this conversation. The way he describes it is like odd questioning. Yeah. You know, he's asking him what the time is and where he's going and what he's doing, but in an inquisitive way, not in a way of trying to work out something, actually really trying to understand what are you doing. You know?
Yeah, oh, right, yeah.
And then he realises reasonably quickly that he's not talking. This is all happening sort of reasonably telepathically.
Wow.
And so he tells this story anyway. He goes about his business afterwards, feeling crazy, reports it. And he reports it and it gets onto the desk of a local reporter. And lo and behold, she has another person, or another two people in a car, the same incident, basically. The same thing happens. Someone comes over to the car looking exactly the same. And this all happens, I think, weeks before the first sighting of the Mothman.
Oh, wow.
So it just shows that within that area of Point Pleasant, for whatever reason, there seemed to be a lot going on at the time. Maybe there's something in the water.
Yeah, something in the water from that munitions factory. They'll drink phosphorus, but there you go.
Exactly. But no, I think it's a fascinating mystery for anybody that wants to research further. There is so much you can do with this one.
Yeah, as you say, there's so many... I know Rennes-le-Château comes up as our benchmark of so many things. And as you quite rightly say, so often that we have the core mystery, and then everybody else who's got their personal passions for different, whether it be UFOs, ley lines or whatever, they will all come in and find their own two penneth to be found there. Whichever is valid, it's just for people to go and find out for themselves.
It is, and that's what we do here. We tee it up. We don't try to go into too much of the depth because we would be doing very, very long shows. And the whole point is that you guys that are watching can watch this, learn a little bit about it, now go away and actually do some study. So please do leave some comments about what you think the Mothman is. Let's talk about that theory that Duncan has about the bird. Is that possible? And also, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you again very soon.